Hello, friends of the internet. Welcome. Today we have a special guest, Frank James. Welcome, Frank James.
Thank you very much, Lindsay. I'm very glad to be here.
You're one of the most known, I would say, INFJs around these parts. So I thought, what better thing to connect on aside from our NI function, right? One of the things that NI likes to do is to really hone in on understanding. I mean, what are your thoughts on NI and understanding as it goes?
If I can come up with one thing that could explain everything else without having to introduce too many new things to it, just making it as simple as possible. As few principles in life as can be. When I'm trying to hash out the meaning, it's like talking about a bunch of different things, but then being like, oh, actually, I'm just saying this one thing.
Mm-hmm. Yep. We think that there's more involved than there really actually is. It's all the same thing that we're saying.
Yeah. Right, yeah. You even see just like how you can talk. You can go through a lot of things, talking it out, and then realize I'm just saying all the same things. There's no need for all of this. Yeah.
Yep, I feel
so.
The same way.
So that's. I really I get that. I can feel the dopamine hit when I suddenly realize this is the same thing as this.
Yes.
This is the same principle as this. Like, great. That makes life a lot simpler.
It does. And I feel like that's constantly what our brain is trying to do with things. It's trying to get, like you said, that dopamine hit of that piece that fits into the puzzle. And then suddenly we're like, oh, yes, like I knew there was something there, or my brain was kind of going into this direction for a reason. And then it fits in. And then it's like, oh, great. Now I can have that thing in my little toolbox of NI and use it for other things. If you could understand anything at 100% right now, what would it be for you? It could be big or small, doesn't matter.
Yeah, well, I think it's pretty big. Like, what I'm always trying to get a grapple on is like human nature and like get that down, or not nature necessarily, but just like maybe human psychology. Like what is making someone work, and not just someone, but everyone. Mm-hmm. So, and that's what I find myself drawn to is like what I've been watching recently. As I found this guy, Chris Voss. I don't know if you've ever seen him. He's like
someone else brought it to my attention.
Hostage negotiator. Yeah. I was like, this is great because he's got to have an NI because he's like, everyone is like this. It's either this or this. There's three types of people. That's it. And it's like, if you say this word, it'll work on everyone doing this thing. I'm like, yes. It's like, I'm trying to figure out people in a way where it's like, if I just push this one button, I can get this reaction.
Yeah.
So I think, if I was given the opportunity to learn something, understand something 100%, that would be it.
We talk at each other way more than we talk with each other, I think, as humans. And you hear one person talking to someone in one language and the other person talking in some other language, and they're just completely missing each other.
Yeah, I mean, and people can even they can even be talking about the same thing, have the same point they're trying to make, but think they're arguing, and it's like, you're not. Like, why don't you see you're saying the same thing? But it's interesting because, like, with the human, like, what makes the human tick, I feel like there's the stereotype that it's like, oh man, INFJs are all about that. But I feel like INTJs probably are too. Like, I think it's more of an NI thing. Mm-hmm. And the TE is figuring it out as well, just on a different level.
Yeah.
I mean, would you say that's accurate?
I would say, like, when we have it in our set, like, if we have a set TE reason to do it, we will go down that rabbit hole with, just all hands off. And we'll just go until we really figure out why. But there's usually some kind of logical reason that fits into something for the reason why we want to do it. And it could be about humans, it could not be about humans, so that, like, the nature of the topic doesn't matter. It's more that it fits into that thing that we want to understand now. And however long it fits, like however long we're into learning it, I mean, it could be years until we really feel like, okay, I have a solid grasp of all aspects of this. And then, so then I think that's where the crossover comes a lot between the INTJs and the INFJs is if we route onto something that's more human oriented, it can look very similar. One thing I think is really cool about the kind of the way you bring in comedy to cognitive type and things like that is you're able to depict these other personality types like in a great, genuine way. What do you feel is the type that you understand the best, like outside of your own type? Because I feel like that's probably everyone's default, but outside of your own type, what type do you understand the best?
Keep leaning for whatever reason toward the TI dominant ones as being my favorites, and in some ways maybe that's making me think I understand them the best. I don't know. I think, but I just there's something about maybe it's the inferior FE that makes me laugh. When I'm trying to write for them, but also maybe the lead SEs. I feel like I kind of understand those, but I don't know, because maybe it's really like, how do you know? This is a really difficult question. How do you know? But yeah, I would let's just say like the INTPs. I think they're the ones, or maybe ISTPs. Mm-hmm. But then do I feel like I just know them because I oversimplify them? Doesn't matter what type it is. I always get comments eventually that are like, dude, you're only showing one side of us. And that's the funniest side. That's why I show it.
I wonder too if it's the fact that, it's almost like you're allowed to play in your personal inferior functions through that type. That almost it's like you're able to explore them on another level.
It's also fun to do the types that are like the ST types that totally don't want to do the NF stuff. So it's almost like, it's like making fun of them, but also making fun of myself. I think ENFJs, the lead FEs might also be the ones that I feel like I understand the best. Mm-hmm. Yeah, ENFJ, and that's weird. That's the same axis now that I think about it.
Yeah.
So, yeah, so maybe
sense.
Those are the ones I feel most confident when I'm writing, mm-hmm. I think.
Tell us about a time where you felt misunderstood.
I think a lot of times it comes to like intent, where that's easy to, I think that's the easiest thing to misunderstand with people. They may be, it's like you do something for one reason and it gets misinterpreted. And it's funny, I don't know if it is purely like a cognitive reaction with like FE, but when someone has an emotional or a value reaction to something you've done and it's negative, you almost like turn it around and be like, they must be right. Like, I must have done that for that thing I did. If I shouldn't have done my TI there.
Interesting.
I didn't pay enough attention to the FE.
Huh.
I think that can be like a common thing with like feeling misunderstood. But it's also like, I suppose with the intuitive stuff, I'm pretty sure like my parents are both ST types, mm-hmm. and or at least both S types. And so growing up a lot of times, I think they didn't always get why I didn't just go with what was like the facts. So, and which was also weird for me because I didn't understand why they didn't see like the pattern that was happening.
Right.
So, and it's not like necessarily like we were both always blind to those things, but it's just like when you're always doing one of them, you notice the times when the other people don't see it. Mm-hmm. So I feel like there's a lot of talk in the community or whatever that I may have been a part of early in my YouTube career, where it's like, like, oh man, intuitives were just so deep, it's like so difficult to understand us, and it's like, it's not necessarily why.
Yeah.
But
it comes down to we communicate in different ways, and that's fine. Like, that's what humans do. But I think for myself, at least, one thing that I felt misunderstood on, like earlier on, was I was always kind of living in this more abstract land, and then I was always feeling pulled down to the sensory world when I was having to interact with other humans, and it never felt I could never really speak my own language with them, and so that always felt strange. And if I did, like when I was really young and I would just go in like weird NI abstract child land, like I realized kids just did not get it. Like it did not work. It was like that level of Lindsay was not tolerated within the circle of little humans, you know? And so I had to be like, okay, I have to learn to speak this other language to communicate with my own type or like my own species. And so I think early on I realized that that was different, but I learned to adapt with it. But it was still like, oh, okay, they don't get that.
Yeah, well, that's good that you were able to adapt to it. But yeah, I can relate to that feeling of it's like being dragged down to the objective sensory and being like, oh man, this is, why are we here? Like, why do you guys want to pay attention to that?
Yeah.
Well, it's interesting now with the current events. For those of you watching in the future, dealing with the quarantine of 2020, it's like we're all thrown into this situation together, and I feel like it would be easy for it to completely devolve into something much worse. But I think society in general has gotten to a point where it's easier to like, make space for other people, understand them, get along. And if you look throughout human history, that wasn't like what was happening. Human history is full of people not either not caring or misinterpreting willfully or not other people, not bothering to understand them, and it always leads to someone getting killed. So, there's very pragmatic day-to-day things, like, or you could flip it the other way, understand people so you can get what you want and take advantage of them. Mm-hmm. But I think the more optimistic one is like, if we can understand where the other person is coming from, well, that's like a perspective thing, but also just understand the way they work.
Right. When I got typed by OP and they typed me as NITE, from taking tests online, I was like, I think this is what I should be, but you guys tell me. And I was like, really I'm like, okay, so really what is NI? Like, what am I doing that is NI? And it was so hard for me to understand what it actually was. And then once I really grasped it, I was like, that's what I'm constantly doing. You mean that's the thing that you were looking at, that's what got you to that? And I just had no idea that this sense of default in my brain that's always going on was what that function was.
And it's weird because I don't have the best understanding of Jung, but he's like, the dominant function is your only conscious one. But I think he meant something different. Like I'm not a good enough scholar to understand it, because to me, I agree with you. It just seems like you're in autopilot. You don't even think much of it. I don't know if you had this reaction, but it sounds like kind of you did. It was like you were looking at that. It's sort of like, that's just what I do.
Yes.
Doesn't everyone do that? It's like, what's the big deal about that? Because you don't realize like other people don't do it all the time.
Exactly. Like, oh. And I think that's what he may mean by being like conscious of it. It's like your default state of how your brain is working is like, that is your state of consciousness, And so, And so then for like other people to come at it from a different perspective, it's like, we're looking at it through our own conscious state. And then, they're coming through some other something. What type do you feel like was the hardest for you to understand, and why behind that?
I think ISFP might be the hardest one, because it's like, well, it's also like, we rely so much on stereotypes for the comedy, and ISFPs, it's like, you're artistic, okay. It's hard to like get rid of the stereotypes where it's like, oh man, FI is like depressed and stuff, because it's like you see a lot of ISFPs, they're like, depression isn't something that occurs to you when you think of these people, So what do you think are some of the best or like the most valuable universal traits that a person can have outside of type from your INFJ perspective? I think, the boring ones, like honesty and good communication like trustworthiness, I think, more than honesty. Like if you can trust someone and you can communicate with them, you can pretty much get along with them regardless of anything else, I think. And those are things that any type could have. And maybe that, like, I'm thinking, like, how does that come from my type? Like, it's sort of like, I mean, that might be like the missing information kind of thing of being out of whack with the observing functions, because it's like, I need to trust you that you are telling me the truth and not hiding things, and that when we are communicating, I get the information you're putting out there in a clear way. So maybe that's just why I came to those two. I don't know. What would you say? Like, are we pretty much in line with that?
I mean, I would say yes. Like, I want to expect truth from people. I also know that sometimes people define truth differently in their own minds. They define honesty different in their own minds. So it's like I kind of have to anticipate that as being a factor in there. It's like, yeah, generally, yes, you want everyone to, be that way as much as possible. But then also I think with that and like with the communication thing, like communication is like a big one for me too. But also the mindset of the person to be of one of like growth and progress and like self-betterment versus just like, I'm good, like this is just how I am, like don't make me, and it's like the thing is like I don't want to make anyone change. I don't want to make anyone do anything that they don't want to do. Like I want to save my own energy for doing my own things, And so when people have the mindset of they want to be better for their own selves and they want to go forward for their own sake of their own being, like no one else's, to me, I'm like, yes, like those are the kind of people I like to be around.
Right, yeah, because it's like you don't want to have to drag them around, like, no, I totally get you. It's like, I don't want to have to take responsibility for your life.
Yes.
There is that feeling of responsibility, maybe not so much, like maybe not in an extreme way, but it's sort of like, I mean, we can't leave people behind. It's like the first thing to do is make sure that these other people are doing all right, which is like a relief when they're finally like, okay, they're taking care of themselves. So because it's like they're taking care of themselves, so now I don't feel so bad about focusing inward on my own. Yeah.
That's the thing. Like any type can get better at communication. Any type can get better at being more honest with the way that they define, finding an objective sense of honesty. And any type can be better at, thinking about the forward progress of their own lives. And maybe that's also an NI thing is, to me, it's important people are looking to the future to say, I need to continue to grow because this is where I want to be at this point in my life. And this is where, I want to progress to. So maybe I'm also being biased in the sense that that's a priority for me. And so it's like, I want to see other people prioritize that.
Right. Yeah. There are people who are just trying to survive through life and they're the ones who kind of stay stuck. It's like, and it's meaningless basically. So, but then when people take responsibility for, developing and growing, then suddenly they're able to like do more than just survive and slide through life and, actually bring humanity as a whole, in their small way, a step closer to transcendence,
Yeah. Yeah, and even just like self-actualizing for their own selves, because I feel like there's so many people you see like older in their lives and they're just like, man, I feel like I haven't like amounted to much, or I could have been this, or I could have been that. It's like, I don't want to see people in that state.
Yeah.
I want to see people who are like, you know what, this was a really uncomfortable part of my life, but I pushed through it because I wanted to do this thing, and I went through all of this shit so that I could go and I could get here, and like I made it. Like I want to see that so much for people, and it's just like it sucks when you see people stuck and you know that there could be a way out of it if they just, you know.
Right. And you could even like tell them step by step, just do this, and they'd be like, nah. So and that, yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
No, man, like I'm good. I'm like, no, all right, fine.
Yeah. Like I worked with a guy once who was like, I don't know how much older, 15 years older than me, maybe a little bit more. And he was like, man, I still don't know what I want to do with my life. I don't know what I want to do when I grow up. And I'm like, you're like 40. So, and it was like, you know, I mean, like I have compassion for someone in that situation, but it's also like you can let that, you can stay in that state forever. And it's, you know, it's never really too late to start making something of yourself, but it doesn't feel good at first, at least, to try to grow. And I think a lot of people think it'll feel good, like, oh man, I'm gonna feel so great once I start making myself a better person. It's like, no, it's not.
Yeah.
So yeah, so I think about, you know, a guy like that, and it's just so, and you know, he was doing fine, living a middle class life, had a family, and you know, surviving better than most people in human history. But it's also like, you know, is it like when you get through to the end of your life, is that worth it?
You want to see people like reach fulfillment for their own selves.
Yeah.
Your sketches and your characters that you play within Type. Do you feel like you use that as a tool for understanding within the Type community?
Yeah, I think I understand it better after making jokes about it. So occasionally, it's not a lot. I occasionally get comments that are like, this guy doesn't know what he's talking about. This isn't right. But it's sort of like I could spend an hour trying to explain theoretically what an INTP is like, but you'll get it way faster if I just make a few jokes where you can be like, I know someone just like that. And if you see enough jokes, you like put together these traits and you see them enough where you're like, I know what an INTP is now. Like, and it's not the most complete, you know, it's a bit of an abridged version of what that type is, but it's enough to get started and be able to see the differentiation between them all, and maybe to even begin to understand, like, what does it look like, you know, an ENFJ with inferior TI, sort of, you know, what does it look like when a ISTJ is really controlling with the SI. I do think that humor is great at, like, it's like NI distilling down something and being like, this is this whole person right here. And if you see it enough, like, I feel like there are a lot of people getting it and wanting to hopefully take the next step and actually then learn the more academic stuff, the theoretical stuff behind it. Once they feel like they can think of the character I did that reminded them of their roommate from college who was an INTP.
What an anecdote does is it gives you a broad spectrum of a picture, right? Like it paints you like a moment of something existing. And if you think about like, okay, like let's say there's a waterfall in front of me and I paint a painting of the waterfall, you know, well, a few days from now, that waterfall, that scene may look completely different, but it's still going to be the waterfall and it's still going to be that area. I'm capturing a moment that it existed and like I'm giving that to people. And like, I feel like that's what anecdotes do, is like they capture a moment of the existence of something and they portray it. And to me, it's like, that's a valuable tool to communicate, you know, with people, because it's like we can only understand so much in a short period of time. Tell us a funny story about you, or just tell us a story about you that will help people understand you just a little bit better.
There was one time I was working at a college and I was working for the music school, and it was during graduation. Our job was to get there super early and set up all the stuff for the band, because the band was going to play during graduation, you know, big, huge deal. But then after you set up at like 6:30, there's nothing to do. So we just sat around in the office. And then I don't know why, we were like walking around outside and we see this bird, this small bird, like hopping in the corner by the door. So it's like an entryway to the door that's like brick walls. So it's just wide enough for the door basically. And he was right there where the door would open. So he was like kind of, it looked dangerous. And he was like really struggling to fly. And I was like, oh crap, this bird is hurt, man. So me and my friend grabbed this box, because I was more worried about where it was, right by the door, like someone's gonna like crush this bird or something. We got a cardboard box and we chased it around, got it in the cardboard box, and I found out that luckily there was like a wildlife rehabilitation place relatively close. I was like, we can get there and back before we need to take down stuff. So we go there with the bird in the box and we take him into the whatever you call it, the building. And they were like, what have you got? Oh man, this bird, we think he's hurt, he couldn't fly. So then they take a look in the box and they're like, yeah, that's a fledgling, they can't fly. He's good, take him back. So I was like, oh. So yeah. But
you captured a bird that never should have been in a box.
Yeah, so it gave us something to do for a while. So then we let it out. And I'm sure it lived a happy life after that. I'm sure it was great.
That's hilarious. Frank James, enlightening conversation. Thanks so much for being on here. Excellent answers. I feel like I understand you a little bit better. And this was great.
First of all, Lindsay, thanks for having me on the channel. This was fun. I think this was a good talk. I hope to maybe do it again sometime. But yeah, I mean, if you haven't been watching my videos, yeah, I usually post Tuesday and Friday, and hopefully now that we're quarantined, I'll be doing Sunday also to get some more entertainment out there.
Boop.
So yeah, and then I live stream Sundays. I'm doing all kinds of stuff. So yeah, check me out if you haven't already.
Cool.
Or don't, whatever you prefer. You know.